Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable, episode 170. Lovely to see so many people with us today already for today's conversation. And more importantly, thank you to everybody who's continuing to support and help grow this community all the time. My name's Matt Baird. I am the founder and host and chair of the Roundtable. I've hosted, I think, 168 of the 170 of these, so doing all right. But more importantly, day to day, I work in recruitment. I've been doing that for 14 years, and it's that which keeps this running and available to all for free. I have just posted a range of vacancies which we've had live over the last week or so. They're all on my LinkedIn, or reach out if you are looking for work. But also, if you're seeking support with your recruitment, please do reach out. The other new exciting piece of news, we are through Spire House, who are the business that I partner with, setting up a WhatsApp community group if you'd like to kind of keep in touch regarding conversations and things like that. It will include details on upcoming roundtables, but also on my colleague Kim Parsons' spotlight reports and other piece of work regarding the social housing space. So do keep an eye out for that and all of the information coming through there. Today's session we're very fortunate to have sponsored by both Alertical, who are our annual sponsor. There's more news on that later this week because that 2024-25 partnership comes to an end on Friday, but they are continuing with us, as are another business. But as I say, more details on that later in the week. But also by Sureserve, who are sponsoring today's session. We're incredibly grateful to them for their support through 2025 and some of the sessions we're running today. We've got Andrew Todd with us today. To those who joined us on the last session, welcome back. To those who didn't, please do go and catch up on the recording, though Andrew, I think, is going to give a few reflections on the last session anyway, and you'll all be pleased to know that we've sorted out the tech issues and we seem to be, touch wood, running absolutely fine today. So I'm going to pass over to Andrew to make introductions. I'm going to, for those who are new, Andrew will present for about 15-20 minutes. We will then move into a more open forum discussion. But if you have any questions or input you'd like to have during Andrew's presentation, please put it in the chat and I will bring it into the conversation once Andrew has finished. So without further ado, Andrew, I'll pass over to you.
Great, thank you, Matt. And yeah, I do feel like you might have jinxed the tech issues, but we've tested it and it should all be fine. I'm going to share my screen and then introduce myself. If you could just let me know when you can see the slideshow.
Looking like we're good and we're off. Excellent.
Great. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Matt kindly introduced, I'm the Andrew Todd. I'm the head of net zero carbon at Sureserve Group. I'll talk a bit about Sureserve itself in the presentation, but we're going to focus mainly on the topic of decarbonising social housing, and particularly the benefits of taking kind of a long-term planning approach to retrofit projects. So what we'll cover is a bit about Sureserve. Wanted to do some reflections on my last social housing roundtable because the conversation was really lively. There were lots of good inputs from residents and housing providers alike. So wanted to kind of pick on a few of those reflections and a few updates since the last one in February. We'll then most of the talk will be focused on the kind of benefits and approaches for developing a long-term retrofit plan. We'll touch upon some of the funding before summarising and going on to Q&A. So a bit about Sureserve. We are aiming to be the trusted partner of choice for social housing and related public sector in delivering compliance services and energy services. So on the compliance side, we are making sure that housing providers are compliant with all the major regulations, and we are servicing and maintaining heating systems. On the energy services side, we're taking a key role in decarbonising social housing, installing retrofit measures, and able to kind of provide a whole house retrofit approach with the consultancy wraparound. We're a growing business, so we've recently made an acquisition of Low Carbon Exchange in the southwest, and we've got probably just under 4,000 employees now, about 64% of which are engineers out there on the ground, fixing boilers, fixing heat pumps, and installing insulation. In terms of our install numbers in 2024, we were one of the major installers in social housing of solar PV, heat pumps, and fabric measures. And a stat there in the bottom right, which I'll draw your attention to, is we are in about 1 million social homes every year, providing one of the many services that we offer across the compliance and energy side. And because we are in so many social homes, providing that kind of essential maintenance and safety checks, we're starting to offer more. So making every visit to social homes count, avoiding repeat visits of multiple engineers. So whilst we're there servicing gas boilers or doing gas safety checks, we can also do multiple other checks across fire, Legionella, electrics, and then also kind of visual checks of damp and molds, the condition of windows and doors, testing smoke alarms, checking fire doors, making sure that they're functioning correctly, testing ventilation, and then other bits of checks around the status of kind of kitchens and bathrooms. So the main aim here is to make sure that disruption to residents is reduced, that you can tackle a lot of these essential checks in one visit. Not that we're going to be solving all the problems here, that it might lead to further inspections, more detailed inspections should issues arise. But it's it's a real value add that we're offering to our social housing clients. So if you could be interested, then do reach out and we can talk you through it. On the energy transition side, so we are aiming to be that partner to take housing providers from their current status of predominantly fossil fueled heating, through to developing a decarbonisation strategy, which is kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. Taking a fabric first approach, which we really advocate for, so upgrading insulation and other building fabric elements where it presents good value for money, and making the building ready for renewable forms of heating and supplemented by solar PV and batteries and other renewable forms of electricity generation. And then the final kind of step in this journey is to assess and monitor and then maintain those properties using a data-led approach wherever possible. So yes, as I said at the start, I wanted to pause and just reflect on some of the conversations from the last social housing roundtable that I was involved in, because I think there's quite a few points there that are really pertinent to the topic of developing long-term retrofit plans and strategies. So a brief update. I think last time we thought that the Warm Homes Plan was going to be launched in spring. It now looks like it's being launched in summer. It looks like they're waiting for the current kind of spending review before officially launching it. However, since we last spoke, there has been funding announced, which is part of the Warm Homes Plan. That's the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund, where just under 1.3 billion of grant funding has been announced, and that will be matched by at least kind of 50% equivalent funds from housing associations. And then we've also got the Warm Homes local grant of 500 million. That's for non-social homes, but low energy efficiency and homes that are likely to be in fuel poverty. And combined, that's going to lead to about 170,000 homes being upgraded. So a significant step forward for the sector, but I think as we all know, things need to be well planned out and not rushed into, so that we're kind of making sure that the right measures are going into the right homes and that residents have a good experience throughout their their So, good resident engagement right from the start, educating residents on how to use new systems and the benefits of their new homes, and then post retrofit monitoring and resident checks, and then touching on some of the experiences from this group about low carbon technologies. There was a real mixed bag. So we had a couple of positive experiences about heat pumps. Someone saying that heat pumps are really efficient because the landlords had invested in future-proofing the properties, which I took to mean upgrading the fabric and ventilation of the homes so that they were heat pump ready, and or installing solar PV to help offset the running costs. And then the second positive comments around running the heat pump constantly and more efficient at creating a good ambient heat. However, we did have quite a few negative experiences, and I would say that the negatives probably outweighed the positives. So we had someone who experienced talked of a home that had both ground source heating and air source heating installed and neither working well. That sounds like a home where something has gone seriously wrong in either the planning or the installation phase, if both of those technologies were tried but not working. We had conversations about air source heat pumps being turned off because they were costing 3 times the amount of electric radiators. And again, something has gone wrong in that circumstance, as typically if you're replacing electric storage heaters or electric rads with heat pumps, you should likely to be seeing a cost saving. And then I was sent a report from a really informed resident group, which had done some research a good few years back looking into the efficacy of ground source and air source. But the results had kind of shown that it wasn't presenting good value for money for residents. And the kind of line which I really liked was that we don't feel these systems should be installed unless a full review takes place, including additional measures to insulate properties involved. I think that really underlines that one of the kind of main issues around installing low carbon heating is that you have to make sure that the quality of the installations is right and that the suitability of the buildings is taken into account. And then the last point, which was kind of coming out of the chat, was that the tariffs that you use and the control strategies for operating heat pumps are also critical. There's various kind of smart tariffs available where you might get a better value for money for running your heat pump at certain times of day. So I think all of these kind of combined highlight that it's not easy. It shouldn't be a quick fix, and that careful planning of how these properties are retrofitted and how these new technologies are adopted is really important, which is what we're going to talk about today. So the benefits of taking a kind of long-term view when you're looking at getting your social housing stock to net zero are manifold. So one point there, though, is you should be looking at EPCC as an interim milestone, not as the final target. The final target should be getting your homes to net zero, making sure that they're warm, that they're healthy, and that your residents have low bills. So some of the benefits would be by doing long-term planning, it helps to get buy-in from your internal stakeholders, which is really critical to kind of secure resources and finances to deliver against that plan. It helps communicate to your external stakeholders as well, in particular your residents, any investors, and your supply chain partners, making sure that they're all on board with how you're going to approach your retrofit. Helps to plan for a whole house approach across your stock delivered to PAS 2035. And that will help to reduce the risk of poor installs and make sure that your installers are kind of held to account for what they're putting in. Helping to embed community engagement and social value into your long-term programming, particularly when you're getting supply chain partners on board, making sure that they're comfortable with your approach and are contributing to your social value gains. Long-term planning will also help you to understand the costs of delivering your program and then identify where you might have gaps, which will all help to prepare you for grant funding opportunities like the Warm Home Social Housing Fund when they come round. In terms of a roadmap out towards net zero, this is what it might look like. So, taking 2025 as your start point, or today, you would be developing or refining your long-term strategy if you'd already developed one. Big part of that is data collection, and I've got a slide to talk about the importance of that. but making sure that you're collecting good data and you're continually improving it across all of your housing stock. You might want to be starting some of those quick win projects early on, which help you to kind of plan for long-term, more complex retrofit delivery. From 2025 to 2030, this is the period from which you'd be needing to get to EPCC across your stock. But as I said at the start of this slide, you shouldn't look to EPCC as the end goal. It should definitely be a stepping stone along the way. So making sure you're taking a no regrets approach to any upgrades to EPCC. During this time, you might be looking at developing heat pump ready homes and starting the rollout of clean heat, and then also looking for a strategy to collect more data from your homes, either pre or post, pre and post retrofit. And then from 2040 to 2050, sorry, this is when you're going to be looking at achieving net zero across your stock. Longer term targets like eliminating fuel poverty from all your residents, and then building in climate resilience into your homes, as we know there's going to be a warming climate, more instances of extreme weather, so making sure that your homes are kind of fit for the future in terms of that changing climate. A big part of developing your whole retrofit program is to understand the individual retrofit project journey. So this project journey that we've mapped out, split into 3 broad phases, is applicable for a grant funded project, but could be a non-grant funded project with a few tweaks. So I won't go through all of these, but some of the critical points in that kind of preparation and design phase, which can happen between kind of 6 and 12 months before you're actually starting to install anything. You want to be doing your data collection improvement, understanding what you can do with your properties. So undertaking retrofit scenario analysis. That will all link into funding that you'll draw down. If it's a funded project, you'll need to do retrofit assessments and retrofit design to PAS 2035, and then engaging with your residents and supply chain. Then on to delivery, which is the actual installation phase. This is when you finalize your procurement. Your retrofit coordination will happen according to PAS 2035. You've got that ongoing resident engagement throughout the projects, making sure that there's enough points of contact for your residents and good information on what's happening to their homes and the progress. Then you've got the installation, commissioning, and handover. And then after retrofit is finished, this is when you kind of get into your aftercare and defects liability phase. So you want to make sure your contracts are tight enough so you can hold your installers to account if there's any snagging issues or any issues with the systems that they've installed, get them back, get them fixed. And then you kind of go through the process again onto post-occupancy evaluation. So checking with your residents that they're comfortable and happy with what's been done. And then you've got more of a kind of long-term phase of in-home monitoring, regular resident education and advice, and then on to kind of ongoing repairs and maintenance, home MOT, which is kind of what I spoke about initially, and then any progress reporting to funders if it's a grant-funded project. This should all happen immediately after the handover of a project, but also at regular touch points. So at each heating season, to kind of refresh what's going on within the residents' homes, and then for any new residents coming into a home who might not be familiar with some of the new technologies. I've spoken about data, and I will continue to because it is so important. Good data is critical for your long-term planning, and you should be looking to multiple sources of data. So things like retrofit assessments, things like surveys of your homes, like boroscopes, which is where you poke a camera inside the walls to have a look at the condition of the cavity wall insulation. You can do thermal imaging to see where you might be getting cold spots or thermal bridging, as it's known, around windows or certain parts of walls where wall insulation might have failed. You've got your general kind of stock condition surveys, which housing providers should be doing on a regular cadence, just to make sure they're keeping up to date with what their stock condition is. there's the EPCs and the reduced data SAP from your EPCs, repairs and maintenance records, planned maintenance schedules, etc., etc., etc. So there's huge amount of sources of data that you should draw from, and then as good data kind of management and governance practices, with all of those sources, you need to check, what's up to date. Does it all make sense? Is it looking logical? Can you compare it to similar properties to make sure that you've got the right data coming through for your homes? Does it look accurate? And is the source reliable? With all of that, then kind of arranging what your single source of truth is for each of your homes. That's just really good practice, so that all of your teams and all of your supply chain know which data is the most up to date and accurate for each home. And then the infographic there, which is taken from the National Retrofit Hub's guidance to archetyping for retrofit, which is a really useful resource, just explains some of the different types of data that you'll need. So you'll need to understand the typology of the building, what the wall type is, the roof type, how it's performing in terms of energy. That's not just the EPC score, but that's things like what's the space heating demand, what's the air tightness. Going into more detail in the typology, the age of the building, the heating type, whether or not you're in a conservation area, those types of things. More specific information around the kind of junctions and any protrusions, whether or not you've got space for a heat pump, what your existing services are like, and then critically occupancy and behaviour. So what are your tenants? How are they using the buildings? What are the occupancy numbers and patterns? Are there any sensitivities around disruptive work that you would need to then carefully plan into your retrofit programs? And lastly, what are the kind of finances available, and how do these homes fit into the broader community? So moving on, we'll talk. Oh no, the dreaded technology issues are back.
We've got the lag.
Yeah, we've got the lag.
It was all going so well.
Do you want to share the slides, Matt?
I
know you've got a
will
copy.
load them up my end.
Yeah.
We knew it would happen.
Yeah.
It's not sure what, it was all working so well. Right, give me just a sec, because I'll load it up my end. Apologies everybody for this. Give us just a minute. We will be back. Oh, that's this one here. This one here. Start that. I will share. I think I would be better at knowing how to share, but that's absolutely fine. Share that one. Lovely. Excellent. Minimize that. Begin. Here.
We are on slide 14, so keep going.
There.
Next. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. If you'd skip back one.
Yeah, it was that one. Okay, excellent. It was where I thought it was. Lovely. Over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. Great. So yeah, this slide is to talk about the importance of putting residents at the heart of any long-term retrofit programming. So we're talking about things like resident engagement and having a distinct resident engagement strategy, so that you're able to communicate what's going to happen to your residents' homes in a really kind of clear and concise manner. With resident engagement on your specific retrofit projects, it's important to start early and to continue resident engagement through regular milestones of the projects. One approach to communicating some of the benefits of retrofit could be to develop retrofit champions. So these would be residents who've had successful retrofits done to their properties and are able to kind of talk about the changes that it's that maybe they'd had to make in order to adapt to the new technologies, and the benefits that they're seeing from that can really help to kind of bring other residents on board. When you're doing resident engagement, to always have a single point of contact, so they have a trusted person that they can go to talk about any issues that they're facing. Using multiple methods of communication to reach your residents about the retrofit projects that are going to go ahead. So not every resident will like to communicate the same way, and it's just being mindful that some might prefer face-to-face, others might prefer letters, others might prefer an email or a phone call. When you're developing your communication, making sure that it's really kind of clear, tailored advice to the specific resident groups, and that you're providing, a good set of information about new technologies using non-technical language and non-technical perspective wherever possible. And then last point here is about bringing your supply chain on board, making sure that they are fully on board with your resident engagement approach, and that they're taking a sensitive approach when they're on site and actually doing the retrofits to your homes. We've got a case study where we had 22 home retrofit scheme. We were doing multiple measures, so loft insulation, solar PV, and heat pumps. And way before the works were due to start. So we use those multiple methods of communication, letter drops, door knocking, going around talking to residents, and then holding community engagement events. At one of these events, we had Daikin, which is an air source heat pump supplier, with a trailer with some of their technologies there and some of their team, talking through how the technologies effectively run. And then during installation, there were both client team, which was Hyde, and Sureserve on site to make sure that we could kind of cover off any queries or issues that residents had. And residents were left with energy efficiency advice post retrofit. Next slide, please, Matt. So I'm going to talk briefly about, how to these are kind of some advice tips about how to build in strategic retrofit planning with your broader retrofit and broader housing issues. So, you really want to start with conducting a comprehensive assessment of your stock to identify what the buildings and what your residents need. I've talked about the importance of different sources of data, so it's making sure you've got that single source of truth, you've got really good data on your stock before you start planning what you're actually going to do there. You should look to align your retrofit with broader asset management plans. So this can help by combining kind of your grant funding for retrofit projects with your maintenance budgets, looking at where you've got end-of-life replacements for things like gas boilers or other components like windows and doors, and integrating all of these together with your fire safety and building safety plans. So you're looking for those opportunities to upgrade retrofit homes when looking at fire safety as well. You should develop an understanding of the broader triggers for retrofit. So where you've got issues of fuel poverty amongst your residents, where you're looking to do asset replacements, or where you might have like a high concentration of issues of damp and mold. These could all be things for triggers for broader retrofit measures and a wider retrofit plan to go ahead. I mentioned this earlier on, but linking retrofit to climate resilience and adaptation. So where you might have issues of either flooding risk or overheating risk, you can integrate retrofit and climate adaptation measures together to provide a more kind of resilient stock over time. In your planning, you can look at things like taking a phased approach. So looking at tackling a specific area or a specific archetype or specific measure types all in one. So you're building up that experience of delivery over time, which can then be rolled out to a wider set of stock at a later stage. Part of that kind of area-based approach might be forming strategic partnerships with local authorities and other housing providers, so that you're not leaving certain homes in an area where you might have a mix of housing providers not upgraded, and you're upgrading everything at the same time, which helps to kind of bring the whole community together. And then building long-term relationships with your supply chain partners, which will allow them to invest in you and in social value and more of that long-term approach. And a good case study that we've got there is a project that we've got with London Borough of Havering. We've got this 16-year energy transition contract where the end goal is developing net zero homes. We're servicing and repairing current heating systems, looking for opportunities for retrofit and upgrade to heat pumps over time. Last point on this slide then is to look to invest in retrofit training for your staff. So for housing providers, I think it's really important that you're informed and your understanding of retrofit projects is high, so that you can hold your contractors and installers to account when things go wrong. Next slide, please, Matt. So within your retrofit program and your long-term planning, you should build in various touch points for reviews and feedback and lessons learned. And some of the key sources of that feedback and lesson learned will be from your supply chain. So making sure you've got mechanisms in place to capture feedback from them about what's worked and what hasn't, and making sure that they've got a program of lessons learned, so they're actually changing things as they go in order to improve the end result technically and the end result in terms of resident satisfaction. You can look to install data loggers in homes. So that would be to monitor homes both pre and post retrofit, and even over the long term, so that you're spotting instances of damp and mold, spotting how heating systems are functioning, building in the ability to do preventative maintenance on any systems rather than waiting for things to go wrong. And then lastly, making sure that you're getting taking the pulse of residents during and after retrofit projects of what's the experience been like for them, how have they how have the installers engaged with them, making sure that you're taking that feedback on board and demonstrating to your residents that you're actually acting on it. Next slide, please. And the next one.
How are we doing on slides, Andrew? Just to make sure we've got time for conversation as well. I'm just looking at
We've got 2 more slides. So this is a quick one just to say that the current grant funding landscape, although we've had some recent announcements, the grant funding landscape for social housing has probably been around 10 billion to date. But we know that social housing retrofit is going to cost in the hundreds of billions. So for social housing providers in their long-term planning to look for other sources of funding, so third-party ESG funding, look at the retrofit credits program by HACT, look at generating your own revenue sources from renewable energy. And if you go to the next slide and the next one, just to summarize then, so we've talked about the importance of long-term planning. Critical to that is good data, so making sure you've got data from multiple sources, that you're checking the quality of it and instilling good data management practices. Looking to put your residents at the heart of any long-term plans, and then with retrofit projects, making sure that you're engaging with your with your residents early, and using various communication methods. Bringing in strategic planning, so aligning your retrofit projects with broader strategic asset management. Taking feedback and lessons learned throughout your projects and your program, and then looking at those multiple sources of finance. Not waiting for grant funding, but building in grant funding to your broader planning. And I will pause there and wait for questions coming through. Thank you for bearing with me and the technical issues again.
No, that's all right. Thank you, Andrew. And I'll just leave your contact details up on the screen there for just a moment. There are a number of questions in the chat, but Jim, I can see you've got your hand up. So do come in, and then I'll go to questions in the chat. If anybody else would like to come in, please do use the raise hand function. We'd love to hear from you. But Jim, over to you.
Thanks. Hi, thanks, Matt. Hello, Andrew. I've seen you on a few webinars, I think, over the years now. Talking about retrofit and everything else, I think we both agree that by now most people should have a rough idea of what's expected with net zero and net gains and everything else. My concern that I find you should perhaps have addressed is the section 106 and the new paragraph L and what that's going to mean for retrofits. Also think you should have looked at what the Ombudsman is discussing now with his new plans and where he's moving forward with his agenda towards business planning and what he's going to be expecting to be looking at with retrofits, biocarbon, neutral. Also, the fact that he's now talking about cyclical works possibly becoming non-cyclical, how this will affect retrofits and also hitting net gains, things like removal of cladding on buildings and things like that. Wonder what your views are on those points, please.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpick there, and I think I don't have any strong views on the section 106. We're installers, and so that would probably be over to any housing provider colleagues to comment on. Some of those other aspects, I think that's on me to dig into and look into a bit more about the change of cyclical works. I think the main thing that we would advocate is that cyclical works and asset replacement need to be built into long-term planning. So, you need to have that really clear understanding of when things are coming to the end of their life and use that as an opportunity to do more than just replacing windows or doors or boilers or whatever the component is. So build that into more of a holistic view of that home. And mixing the kind of grant funding and asset replacement budgets together can be a really good way to do more and make your money go further. But I've taken note of the other things and I'm going to look into them. But if there's any housing provider colleagues that are on the call and wanted to comment, I'd open it up to them.
Thank you very much. And I will, while we're waiting for someone to come through, I'll just go to some of the points that have been raised in the chat. This episode of the Social Housing Roundtable is sponsored by Alertical. Alertical helps as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. Alertical's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Calls, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alertical works with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and landlords. In 2022, Alertical won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023 won Housing Supplier of the Year. I'm delighted to have them as our sponsor of the Social Housing Roundtable throughout 2024. Alex had mentioned, if air source heat pumps are being fitted in homes without adequate insulation, is this just throwing money away? And Sue had said, doesn't using different tariffs at different times something you need to invest in the tenants so they actually understand the technology? Finbar had mentioned that in response to that, yes, tenant and resident awareness will be key in all transitions. For us, it's been a good start point with some energy advice officers and engagement evenings to help educate with this detail, as tariffs are forever changing. The correct tariff could sometimes be very site or home specific. But just going back to Alex's point there, with air source heat pumps being fitted without adequate insulation, I think it's interesting. I ran a roundtable for another business for NetMag Media a couple of weeks ago in person around Awab's Law, which is obviously coming in October and being made legal. And Kim Parsons has put a post up recently on that I mentioned earlier on her Spotlight series around this. There's that balance at the moment between going, we have to advance the technology and we have to be moving forward with everything, but are our homes ready? Is the engagement ready? Is the content ready? Is the communication ready between the two? I don't know if it is. So I guess to Alex's point, do we feel like money is being thrown away if air source heat pumps are being installed because because that's what we're being told we have to do, even if the homes aren't properly insulated, Andrew? I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think certainly it depends on the end goal, right? So if your end goal is just to reduce carbon, then, and I think for a lot of private sector homes and owner occupiers who really want to make an impact on that, they might look to install a heat pump without having to, upgrade the insulation or spend a lot of money on insulation. I still would always advocate for looking at insulation as on a value for money approach. So spending the right amount to bring the energy demand down before you're installing a heat pump. You want to look at the running costs and what's going to be affordable for the occupier of the building. And I think, when we're looking at social housing retrofit, decarbonisation is one of the aspects. It's not the end goal. As alluded to at the start, is providing a warmer home that's affordable to run and where there's not going to be any health issues. And I think you've got to, wherever possible, upgrade the fabric to achieve that.
Thank you very much indeed. Alicia, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, thank you. Another interesting session. I love these ones. One of the things I think the problem is with this net zero, it's kind of one of the in things. And the thing that really is disappointing me, it's become yet another add-on. And one of the issues we have with social housing is everything is an add-on. So we're replicating some things, we're not addressing others. And don't you think, I mean, what I love about the round table is we have a mix of informed tenants and people from the housing associations and also people like you, Andrew. And don't you think it's time for us to almost take a step back and actually all understand what we're talking about? And I mean, James, the stuff that James has talked about is something that James, Sue and I talk about regularly, for us to actually really understand what this means so we're not wasting money. Because whenever one of these things comes up, there's money invested, and there has been a lot of money invested in net zero. And I don't think we're yet in a place where us as tenants understand quite where all this money's going to. And there's a difference between us being engaged in the fact that we are told what it's going to do for us to have these improvements, and bearing in mind that some of us actually probably have as much information as the housing associations do. So it's more of a comment than a question. But what can people like you do, Andrew, to make sure that we get this as something, as I say, take the step back, take a real good big picture look at this, rather than it become just another thing that's an add-on that in 30, 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ahead, we'll have to be looking at it again because we haven't done it properly. And, the air pumps is a question in mind. We're potentially wasting thousands upon thousands of pounds because we haven't taken an overall picture, and someone has to say, stop, let's take an overall picture. And I think the net zero is something that, this would be perfect for us to take a longer term and bigger picture look. Sorry, a lot of ranting, but it means a lot to me.
There's a few things I'd like to respond to. I completely agree that, it's kind of come round quickly, and this kind of badge of net zero is probably a little bit unhelpful, particularly in social housing, where that leads to my previous point. That's not really the end goal here. The end goal is providing comfortable, warm homes that are affordable. So I think there's a kind of communication task for social housing providers and installers like ourselves to make sure that we're communicating the benefits of these schemes and why we're doing the retrofit more broadly to housing association residents. The whole thing about spending money because it's coming around and it potentially being wasted if it's not done correctly is really critical, and that's why we advocate that housing providers are doing more long-term planning, that they're looking at what's the journey to getting homes towards those end goals of being warmer and cheaper to run, and it has to be a kind of long-term view. So it has to be beyond these interim targets of EPCC by 2030 out to 2050 and beyond even. So yeah, I completely agree, Alicia, with the sentiment, your comments there. And I think we just need to communicate better and do more long-term planning and not rush into things when there's grants available.
I'm going to go to some of the points that are in the chat, and then I'm going to Finn and then to Liz. And then if we're still got time and stuff, I'll come back to Jim. But Alicia had also said in the chat that I'm the person who made the comment about the success of my heat pump. I must admit that I also spend time checking my tariff. I have an understanding of how every appliance in my flat costs me. I've been crying out to my housing association for more detailed information regarding net zero and retrofit, and have been invited to be part of a new project with tenants from a group of 5 HAs who work closely together here in Suffolk and Norfolk to get a regional tenant group up and running, where our main focus will be scrutiny of TSMs, but we'll also have the opportunity to look at net zero, which is great to hear. Judith has said we have so few visits from anyone who collects data about our homes, and the things that change for us are age and our health. Adaptations can change things suddenly. My home was built in 1870. I see houses being bought for £1.5 million. Having months of retrofit work. Planning works for these types of homes is vital. Installation of a high standard is vital. Our landlords need our information. But on the flip side of it, you know, Claire Patterson had mentioned, who is tends to be the person I go to for a lot of data insight, that, you know, reliable data is crucial for everything, but it's when we're asking, how we're asking, whether or not we need the data and when we need it. And it's a balance between the two that we're still working on. Where are we in terms of people who've not commented? So Alicia had said cyclical works need much better communication. I think a lot of that has kind of come through, and we can hear that today. But, you know, where did we have a couple of you had to leave? So Sue Healy has said the end goal is comfortable, warm homes, but it's fragmented. It's the never-ending applying for funding opportunities. So the upgrades are built around funding available rather than what's actually needed. Couldn't agree more there sometimes, unfortunately. But I'm going to go to Finbar and then I'll go to Liz. So Finbar, I'll bring you in first.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I'm Finbar Stratter. I'm a colleague of Andrew's at Sureserve and work closely on the operations side, so a little bit closer with some of the tenants. And Alicia, I think, is probably one of my key focal points to speak with a lot of our clients and tenants, is that end user awareness is probably going to be the biggest transition part we need to a little bit more education, not just for the associations, but for the tenants. What we see a lot of the new bills coming across, people are just landed into them. And a lot of my calls on a day-to-day operations basis is for basically controls awareness, how the system works, how it operates, how a low temperature system works, how a ventilation system is set out in place, whether that's their MVHR. So I think so much is really geared around that end user experience. I do a lot of, obviously, with manufacturers. I speak with manufacturers a lot, which I believe, you know, we look back 20 odd years ago, we had the combi TV ads all over about let's upgrade to a combi, get rid of our cylinders, and we made people aware of that. I think that's what next needs to happen with some of our big manufacturers, is the awareness of how low temperature heating works, and how air changes and our ventilation works within our houses. And I think we're going to see that quite quickly. But I do definitely agree. I think, Alicia, that was probably the biggest point for me, is end user education is really where we sit now, and that's key. That's one of the biggest points I do with a lot of talks, whether that's in colleges or at kind of education evenings within some of our councils and housing associations. But yeah, that's definitely, for me, that's top of the list, absolutely top of the list.
I think what's interesting in that space as well, just before I bring Liz in, is that I think sometimes housing forgets that general population, myself, others, don't have stuff like air source heat pumps, aren't having everything put into their homes in the same way we aren't. You know, a lot of us still have gas or combi boilers and everything else. So when we're, you know, asking for information and things like that, housing is sometimes very much like, well, we're moving faster, which is great if it works. But if it isn't like it's just common knowledge and you can go to a friend and say, hey, I'm having this issue, what do you think? Because, well, I've never heard of it. I had a discussion with my partner and her friend the other day who said, oh, we'll never get an air source heat pump, everything's just more expensive. And that was the blanket line, and I had to kind of go back and go, well, actually, if used correctly and yada, yada, these things can work. But I do think sometimes housing forgets that we are a bit of a bubble when it comes to some of this stuff. Not everyone, the general population, aren't advancing in the same way. And so when we're looking at our delivery of communication and our delivery of the information that gets out there, we do need to sometimes take that a little bit longer to go, look, actually, this is how it works and this is what it's all about, because we take it for granted that this stuff is normal. And for the majority of people in the UK, it still isn't. Just a bit of insight and thought myself there. But Liz, I'll bring you in. Got you on mute still at the moment. Let's try and unmute you.
There
we are.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a terrible cold, so forgive my voice. obviously at the Centre for New Midlands, the think tank, we did a study about retrofit within the West Midlands, and poor satisfaction was the biggest outcome of that study, which we shouldn't be having to do that study. I totally believe that all grant funding for retrofit should have key performance indicators, and that should be on the energy efficiency achieved and the tenant satisfaction. At the moment, we're throwing money at things to be able to tick green boxes, and we're not actually monitoring performance. That's letting us down, it's letting the planet down, and it's letting the tenants down. We're actually not saving the energy that we believe we can, because we're not holding ourselves to account. It's nonsense. And I think there needs to be a key performance indicator that is over the next 10 years of the retrofit that we're putting in, on the value for money that it's giving, not just for the landlord, but for the tenant, and energy and fuel poverty. The biggest omission that I see from these exercises is the lack of design, overall design, envelope design for these properties. So we're doing retrofit piecemeal. A building doesn't work like that with energy efficiency. You have to look at the entire building envelope, and we're just not involving the experts on that design, that front end design, in what we're actually putting in these homes. So there's lots of work to do. And the thing that upsets me most is that people are suffering in the meantime, being used almost as guinea pigs. So we have to do better. How we do that, I'm not sure, but we need to get this feedback back, that we can't just be doing this and spending all this money without monitoring our actual performance. And any ideas from anyone as to how we can do that nationally is really important. The other thing is the software that's being written and the controls that have been mentioned many times here. There's complete lack of tenant involvement in developing that technology. Absolutely. And that is a huge omission. So we need user-friendly controls to these measures that we're putting in. At the moment, we don't do that. We have different apps. We have all sorts of different technology being put in. It is completely overwhelming for normal people. It's an age-old thing about having tech designed by techies, and we need to be more user-friendly. So those are just the 2 points, really, was being more user-friendly, listening to the tenants up front and the end users up front, and holding ourselves to account by having KPIs attached to the funding that we have, I think. Sorry if I've gone on a bit there.
You haven't at all, Andrew. I'm going to go back to you and a couple of points in the chat, and then I'll bring Jim back in. But Andrew, in terms of on Liz's points there, I can see an awful lot of agreement from both people on the screen and in the chat.
Yeah, no, completely. And Liz, so the grant funded projects that are currently live, all of the retrofits need to be installed and designed to PAS 2035. That means you're taking a long-term view of the building. So you don't, whilst you might kind of do retrofit piecemeal, you do one measure at a time, it will be according to a long-term plan, so that you've taken into account the interaction of the different measures. So that is a really critical point. And I think non-grant funded retrofit can often miss that, and they see that standard as a burden and as an additional cost, but actually it's there to reduce risk and to make sure that it's done properly over the long term. So would make sure, advocate for that standard being used for grant and non-grant funded projects. The point about kind of data I think is critical as well. So we do need more sources of monitoring for heat pumps, but also generally within homes. Again, that needs to, as you said, be designed with residents and with residents in mind, to make sure that they're comfortable with how these systems operate, that they're comfortable with the data of their homes and systems being captured and used. And I think if you don't get that bit right, then there'll always be a huge barrier. But more data actually on how things are performing, and key performance indicators being added to contracts. I think just basically I'm saying I completely agree with everything you just said.
Go on, Liz, please do come back. Yeah, you're still on mute.
I'm not sure if I lost my voice completely. I agree, PAS is fantastic, but it's only on the front end. We have nothing to monitor the outcome at the other end. And that's the core issue. But thank you very much. Yes, I think we both absolutely agree on everything there, but we do need to do better somehow. Thank you.
I can see some of the points from the chat. So Julie had mentioned, I'm finding that tenants understand more than housing providers thought they did, because so many have said to her that if all this technology is developing and improving all the time, but I'm happy right now with what I've got, why wouldn't I hold out until I get the improved version in a few years' time? It seems we need strong education and strong arguments backed up with evidence they will believe to bring these tenants on board. And it's obvious that these tenants will all be watching and looking for faults because they're being treated as guinea pigs. And I couldn't agree more that, this is being tested and rolled out in the housing sector far more than it is any other area at the moment. And inevitably, there are going to be problems when things like this are tested on those who, I guess, if you're looking at it as a stereotype, and I'm not meaning to, but have less disposable wealth and income for things to go wrong with. Claire has said, thanks for expanding on my comment about data. You're spot on. While reliable data is crucial, this retrofit work and grant funding often comes with a lot of confusion about customer data and who it should and can be shared with. Ted had said that he made a couple of points about his own experiences, which haven't been great, but then said that obviously, surprisingly, the company who fitted them all went bust soon after. And I think that potentially speaks an awful lot in terms of where things have been placed, why it's not working, following all the guidance and actually just costing more. And Michael has mentioned there that he recalls a 70-page instruction manual for air source heat pumps was a major barrier to understanding in new builds 10 years ago. Has this changed? Andrew, I'll go back to you. Sorry, Jim, we've kind of only got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to go back to Andrew for final thoughts. But on that, on some of the points raised there, Andrew, in terms of we're looking at that long-term plan for retrofit, which was obviously the discussion today, it seems that there's a lot of enthusiasm for long-term retrofit. There's a lot of understanding that there is a need for it. But equally, I guess the question maybe more broadly is that the social housing sector is being, almost the test subject for a lot of this that's going on at the moment. What can be done better to make sure not just that engagement is better, but also that the products we're using and the systems we're using to deliver those products are going to be the most efficient and not just kind of trial by fire, which is what I guess some people are feeling it feels like at the moment.
Yeah, I think just to summarize then, so housing providers need to look at retrofit and look at net zero opportunities not as quickly, let's respond to a grant, let's get that in and bung the new systems in and then forget about it. It needs to be built into the whole strategy for how they're approaching improvements to their stock, improvements to their communities, and how they're engaging with residents on it. The importance of good resident engagement and education on new systems is critical. I think we've covered that at length. That's not a one-size-fits-all strategy as well. Different residents take different approaches. So I think housing providers really need to invest in that side of it. And then I think to Elizabeth's point and broader kind of questions and queries about the longevity of some of these systems, installing more data capture so that you can actually understand how things are performing, how and when things are going wrong, and then respond to them quickly, and that housing providers can hold their installers to account because they've got the data, because they've got the evidence base, I think is critical.
Thank you very, very much indeed. We've almost finished bang on time, and a huge thank you to Sureserve for sponsoring today's session and for bringing that insight. We are going to start trying to use the LinkedIn group to have a bit more conversation and chat. And what I will also do is I will share with anybody who wishes to, please reach out to me if you want to join the WhatsApp community group that we're building. Next week on the Social Housing Roundtable, we have Eddie Hughes, the former Conservative Party politician who was the Undersecretary for Rush Sleeping and Housing. He's coming on to talk about housing and politics for people who don't like politics. So that could be a very interesting discussion in terms of difference of thought potentially. So do please join us and engage with us there. But for now, a massive thank you to Andrew for today. A massive thank you for joining us. And if anyone has any further questions, do please reach out and we'll look forward to catching up with you then. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt.